Welcome to the deep dive. We are cutting through the noise, stacking up the research, and really delivering the crucial knowledge you need to win in today's most complex environments.
And today, we are dissecting the biggest invisible killer in B2B sales pipelines.
Yeah, when people think about losing a deal, they usually picture two things, right?
Right. Either you lost to a draw competitor, better price, better features, or you lost to just, the inertia of the status quo.
But the research we've pulled together shows the most damaging outcome, the most frequent one. It's neither of those.
It's silence.
It's silence. It's that moment when a fully qualified deal, often after months of work, just goes dark internally. We are talking about internal inaction.
And the statistic here it should really frame every strategy meeting you attend. A staggering 40% to 60% of qualified B2B deals are lost to what the industry calls no decision.
Think about that. Just let that sink in.
It's huge. That means potentially 6 out of every 10 deals that you thought were solid, that made it past all the early stages, they're not converting.
And this is revenue just leaking out of your pipeline, not to a rival.
But simply to indecision, to internal friction.
And crucially, that loss rate is consistently documented as more frequent and, frankly, more financially damaging than losing to any direct competitor.
Yeah.
This is your central vulnerability.
So our mission today is a 3-part investigation into this brutal B2B reality.
First, we need to understand the new balance of power. How much control does the modern buyer truly have, and how does that change the whole timeline?
Second, we're going to dive into the psychology of why deals stall. Why does this paralysis, this indecision, kill more deals than your competition?
And how do we deploy the tactical antidote for that, which is the JOLT framework?
And finally, what are the big systemic changes, specifically embracing consensus enablement that revenue teams have to adopt to architect a system that's actually built for group decisions, not individual heroism?
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with that hard truth about the modern buyer.
They are absolutely in control.
Absolutely. And the idea of selling to a single point of contact is, it's long dead.
We are so far past the days of the individual decision maker. The modern B2B purchase is a collective decision. It has to be. It's all about risk mitigation and complexity.
And the numbers back this up. Our sources show buying committees now average between 10 and 11 members.
11 people.
11 people, spanning different departments, different levels. The research confirms that 82% of all B2B buying decisions are made by groups, not individuals.
And those groups aren't just mid-level managers. VP-level execs are actively involved in, 52% of those buying groups?
So this committee reality means consensus is mandatory, and that's changed the whole shape of the sales cycle.
What's fascinating is how this group behavior has actually compressed the buying experience. It's made it faster.
Right, the average cycle has shortened from about 11.3 months down to 10.1 months, which looks like efficiency on the surface.
But it changes where the influence is actually applied.
And hand in hand with that, the point of first contact, the POFC, with sellers has shifted earlier. It's moved from 69% of the way through the buyer's journey to 61%.
Now, if you're a sales leader, you hear that and think, great, we're getting in earlier.
More time to persuade.
Right. That is the dangerous assumption. We have to look at why that shift happened. It wasn't because buyers suddenly wanted to listen to more sales pitches.
And this is where it gets really interesting. What was driving that earlier engagement?
It was technology validation. A striking 58% of buyers who engaged earlier gave one reason. They needed to evaluate how vendors were implementing AI inside their solutions.
So it wasn't about features, it was about future-proofing. It was technical reassurance.
Exactly. They're showing up at 61%, not to be persuaded, but to vet a technical detail.
Which brings us to this day one decision reality. If buyers are engaging at 61%, how much room is there really for a seller to sway the outcome?
Sadly, very little. The core decision is largely locked in during what the research calls the selection phase, which is that first 60% of the journey.
And the hard data on this is just staggering. It shows that 94% of buying groups rank their shortlist in order of preference before they ever speak to a seller.
94%.
So by the time your SDR gets that inbound lead, the race for preference is practically over?
It is. You're competing to lose if you aren't already the preferred option.
Precisely. And the data just keeps reinforcing this. 95% of the time, the winning vendor comes from that buyer's day one shortlist.
And the vendor the buyer contacted first. the one that was their favorite before any contact.
Hmm.
That vendor wins about 80% of the time.
So first contact isn't about persuasion. It's a reflection of a confirmed preference.
Exactly. A preference built on all that pre-existing research they did on their own.
The implication for you listening to this is massive. You have to fundamentally redefine what success looks like in those early stages.
Success is no longer measured by raw lead volume. It's not even about how great your discovery call is.
Success is measured by your day one shortlist inclusion rate. If you are not in the conversation before that bell rings, you are fighting for the 5% of scraps left over.
Which means your content strategy is, in effect, your primary sales team for the first 60% of that journey.
Right. If buyers can't easily find your materials, build their own internal business case, and educate their 11-person committee using your insight.
You lose. You're shut out of the selection phase entirely.
Okay, so that sets the stage perfectly for our second big question. If buyers are so advanced, they know who they prefer. Why are 40 to 60% of these deals still stalling? Why do they end in that catastrophic no decision loss?
This is where we pivot from, external competition to internal psychology.
Sure.
The deals stall because the buying committees, despite all their early research, they face this overwhelming internal misalignment information overload.
And just sheer organizational complexity. So the buyer has a problem, they research a solution, they form a shortlist, and then they just stop dead. What is that psychological hurdle?
The ultimate root of the no decision loss is the buyer's deep-seated fear of making a mistake.
The fear of making a mistake.
The researchers call it the error of commission. The fear isn't, will the status quo hurt us? The fear is, what if I choose the wrong solution and my action causes a failure that I get blamed for?
That makes perfect sense. They've already done the risky part, which is deciding to change it all. Now they face that final personal risk, choosing the specific path.
Exactly. And this is why traditional sales urgency tactics, you know the ones.
FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Right. It's why they so often fail.
Why do they fail in this context?
Because they just exacerbate the underlying anxiety. The research here is incredible. 84% of the time, that traditional FUD approach has a negative impact on win rates.
Wow.
The buyer is already suffering from analysis paralysis. When you pile on artificial urgency, you don't motivate them. You make them retreat into the one safe option.
Which is doing nothing.
Doing nothing.
So we need an antidote to this paralysis, something that provides authority and guidance, not more pressure.
And that brings us to the JOLT framework.
Okay, JOLT.
It's a prescriptive approach that revenue teams need to adopt the second a deal threatens to stall. It's designed to give the seller a structured way to act as a confidence accelerator.
So it's 4 key steps. Let's run through them. How does the seller start?
The first step is J-judge, the level of indecision.
Okay.
The seller has to actively discern, is the stall because they're genuinely happy with the status quo? Or is it because of this fear-driven paralysis? You're diagnosing the ailment.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If a committee keeps asking for slightly different versions of the same security document, that's not contentment. That's the IT stakeholders' fear of commission showing.
Right. So once you've judged that it is indecision, what's next? How do you move them past it?
Offer a firm, guiding recommendation. The seller has to step up and be a trusted authority.
So instead of saying, here are 3 options, which do you like?
You say, based on your company's unique profile and the goals you set, we firmly recommend path A. Here is why. You cut through the complexity for them.
Yeah. And that kind of authoritative guidance has a real impact.
It can double deal closure rates in these situations.
Okay, so after you offer that recommendation, the third step is L, limit exploration needed. This seems to go right after that spiraling research tendency.
Exactly. You actively reassure the buying group that they have enough information to proceed. You might say something like, look, you could spend another 2 weeks reviewing every single feature, but the data in the ROI summary is all the finance team needs to approve the budget. You have enough.
You're giving them professional permission to stop the endless research.
You're combating that fear that they missed one critical piece of data.
And finally, the most direct attack on the core problem. T, take perceived risk off the table. This hits that fear of commission head on.
Right. You have to proactively address the risk, both organizational and personal, with clear safeguards.
Like what? Shorter contracts.
That's a great one. Shorter-term contracts, a highly phased rollout where they only pay after the first milestone's success. You're basically saying, if this goes wrong, the personal and financial cost to you is minimized.
When you reduce that perceived risk, You build the confidence they need to finally reach consensus.
Exactly.
Now, I have to challenge this for a second. If 95% of the deal is locked in during that first 60%, isn't a framework like JOLT coming in too late? Aren't
Right.
we just trying to rescue deals that were maybe poorly sourced to begin with?
That's a really important question. The answer is that JOLT is essential because of the committee. The selection phase gets you on the short list, yes. But that final 40% is where the internal committee negotiation happens.
And that's where the indecision lives.
That's where it lives. JOLT is the tactical repair kit for that moment. But you are right. We absolutely need to fix the system that creates the indecision in the first place.
So what does this all mean? The JOLT framework is the tactical fix, but the sources are clear that the problem is fundamentally structural.
We need to fix the system. Absolutely. The problem isn't about individual salespeople lacking a technique. It's an architectural failure of the entire revenue engine.
And that misalignment between sales and marketing is incredibly expensive. We're talking 10% or more of annual revenue just lost.
Wasted effort. Conflicting messaging. It's rooted in siloed operations. The sources highlight that these teams often measure completely different things.
Right. Marketing is looking at activity signals, clicks, impressions.
While sales is focused on revenue outcomes, they aren't even talking about the same customer journey.
And compounding that is the content gap. Organizations pour millions into content.
And 80% of it is never used by sales
Why?
because sales deems it irrelevant. It's not right for the buyer's specific stage or what they need for that committee discussion. The content is designed to attract a lead, not enable a champion.
So this requires a major pivot. The sources call it a buyer-led, consensus-centric GTM strategy. This is the consensus enablement mandate. Where does that system fix start?
It starts with a unified architecture, and that means agreeing on a single, validated ideal customer profile, an ICP.
One that's based on real buyer insight, not guesswork.
Yes, until the entire revenue organization, marketing, sales, success, agrees on precisely who they serve and what their internal hurdles are, everything else is built on sand.
And once we know who the committee is, the job of the seller has to shift dramatically. They become a buyer coach.
Their core function has to be simplifying the purchase. Remember, 77% of B2B buyers describe their last purchase as difficult or overly complex.
The seller's job is to reduce that complexity, to be an expert guide.
And to anticipate those cross-functional objections before they happen, to prevent the friction that leads to a stall.
Okay, but when you have 11 people in a room, you can't be there for every conversation. So a huge part of this has to be equipping your internal advocate, your champion.
Absolutely. The champion is your internal salesperson. They need to be armed like a trusted colleague.
What does that look like in practice?
It means tailored content. Not just feature sheets, but internal presentation decks. Clear financial business cases they can hand straight to the CFO. Mutual action plans.
You're giving them the tools to navigate their own internal politics.
And build that cross-functional buy-in they need for consensus.
Which brings us to tailoring the messaging. You can't just give the champion one generic deck.
No, that's a non-negotiable step now. If you're selling a workflow automation tool, the message for the CIO about compliance has to be totally different from the message for the VP of sales about adoption rates.
You have to move beyond features and address their unique definitions of success.
Right. Finance cares about ROI. IT cares about security risk. End users care about their daily workflow. You have to show how your solution serves all three to get that full consensus.
Now, as we're restructuring the system around consensus, we also have to talk about the changing human dynamic. There's this paradox emerging with AI and human engagement.
Yeah, while AI tools are incredible at increasing speed and efficiency in pre-sales, the initial research, the qualification, the need for authentic human guidance is actually rising in those crucial final stages.
It feels like B2B went fully digital for a while, and now the pendulum is swinging back towards human expertise, especially when the real money is on the table.
It is, because the transactions are high stakes and complex. Gartner predicts that by 2030, 75% of B2B buyers will prefer sales experiences that prioritize human interaction over a pure AI one.
Especially in those complex deals.
Buyers crave the reassurance, the personalized coaching, and the accountability that only a human seller can provide when they're finalizing a massive decision.
This directly dictates the new role of that human seller. They have to transition from being a product pitcher to an orchestrator and buyer coach.
And this transition aligns perfectly with the core principles of the Challenger methodology.
How so?
Well, it's about teaching customers new insights, tailoring the message to their world, and taking control of the conversation to disrupt assumptions and guide them to a conclusion.
So the seller isn't just validating what the customer already thinks.
No, they're guiding the customer's learning process and steering that internal consensus effort.
And to make this shift possible across an entire organization, formal sales enablement programs become absolutely essential.
They're the engine of change. I mean, companies with established enablement see a 7 percentage point improvement in win rates. These programs are how you teach the high-level challenger and consensus skills.
And the ROI is there.
It is. We see formal enablement accelerating new reps' time to productivity by 37%, and we see 63% of sellers hitting quota versus only 50% in companies without it. It's a measurable investment.
So what does this all mean? The research is, I think, unified on this one powerful directive.
If you want to stop that catastrophic 40 to 60% leakage in your pipeline, you have to stop focusing all your resources on generic lead gen late in the cycle.
And redirect them to consensus enablement and getting onto that day one shortlist early in the journey.
The biggest competitor you have isn't a rival company with a flashier product. It's the buyer's internal paralysis. It's fueled by that fear of commission.
Your entire go-to-market strategy has to pivot from pressuring buyers to facilitating clarity, simplifying complexity, and reducing that fear of making a mistake.
So if winning a deal is less about persuasion now and more about building confidence and consensus, consider this.
How effectively are you currently using prescriptive techniques like JOLT judging indecision, offering guidance, limiting exploration, and taking risk off the table to directly address that buyer's deepest fear?
What is your personal loss rate to no decision? And what single systemic change, like unifying your messaging across your ICP, will you make today to reduce it?